So, hello and welcome to the podcast, the Online Entrepreneur Academy. And today it's my huge pleasure to have with me Obahi, and I'm going to hand straight over to him to introduce himself because this is a man of many talents, and we're going to spend at least half an hour talking about that. Obahi, over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Susan. I really appreciate you. Yeah, my name is Obehi. You heard Susan said I am a Nigerian, but I live in Verona, the city of light and love, actually. If you have read the book Romeo and Juliet, this is the setting of that story. So yeah, I came here in the August of 2004, and since then I've been here all along. This is actually where the body of my work actually started, and of course, it have expanded to different places now. But I love to be here. I've learned a lot being in this city as an African here. So I
Oh,
don't know if
brilliant.
that sort of give you a kind of a background about me, but I could go on and on.
Yeah, you probably because you've done so much. I don't think we'd have time to go over it all. But how amazing to live in that beautiful place because most of the audience will be familiar with Shakespeare and, as you say, the story of Romeo and Juliet. But back
Yeah.
to you. Tell us a little bit about what you do because you have books, you've written, what, 10 books, I think, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct. So actually, like I was saying, I got here in the August of 2004. So I was curious to understand about the story of other people that look like me in this part of the world. So I was like, but what has been this story? I was thinking that maybe I could just walk into a bookshop and get a book to read about it because that's how I wanted to understand it. But it happened that I didn't find that book. So it occurred to me, therefore, that I'm going to have to write that book. Because then, before I go to Italy, I've written my first book, and so I already know what to do now. So just that for me to write that book, I need to talk to the people that I met here. So that is
Mhm.
how my research started, which is titled The Journey. So with that project, I've interviewed a lot of people. Of course, the people that were here before. By this time, I was interviewed, and they were already a man. Some of them were already like almost like grandfather. So they were telling me how they started here as students and coming from different countries, from countries like Eritrea, from Morocco, from Nigeria, from different countries in Africa, from Ethiopia, and some of them too. So that project we lead to two books directly. The first
Okay.
one is a Journey Africans in Verona, which is a city where I live again. And the second book from that project is titled The Color of Our Children, which examine those schools. The region where we live is called Veneto. So
Okay.
this particular part of the project look into three cities in this Veneto region: the city of Verona, the city of Padua for some,
Hmm.
and the city of Vicenza. So these were the three cities that we actually focus on in this research because we're trying to understand if in the first part we look at the first generation of African who came here from the mid 1975 upward, but what about their children? What is their experiences? So
Mm.
that helps us to understand, talking to different school directors, school teachers, parents, and children to understand what is going on within intercultural situation in the school. Because, okay, that part of the project actually started because a child that was supposed to be enrolled in a school when the family was still in the southern part of Italy, in Napoli, when they came to Vicenza, the child could not be allowed to enroll in the school. And the reason they gave was that because the child is an African, it's a black child, it will become difficult for the Italian children to socialize with this child because it's going to be difficult for them. So the parents were told, you can go and look for a private school to enroll this child. So in the course of the story, then that was strange for me
Very strange.
because, but why would a thing like that happen? And it happened also that the person who was telling them that was a reverend father. It was a priest who was in charge of the school. So there was different dimension to that story. So that led us to then even go as far. We met with different people in the school because we went particularly to the school. Although things have changed at the time we went there because I
Yeah.
went there with the parent of the daughter who by this time have already finished university in Verona. So we went there to see what is the situation really in this
Really,
school.
yeah.
Of course, we saw that things have changed. They even have a picture of a kind of a multicultural child, you might call it, in the almanac of the school now. So in that case, it means something have changed. But we wanted to understand what have happened before that change happened. So
Yeah.
so that is why we went there. So of course we went to the school director in Vicenza. We interviewed different people. That was an important part of the project. Yet again, the first one was basically about the first generation who were talking about their experiences, why they came here, what has been their challenges. One of the things that I really want to pay attention to there, or I want to highlight, is that we sit or stand on the shoulder of the giant before we can see ahead of us. That is always true. And that is what I also find in this research. Because some of the people that I interviewed, they told me that when they got here, even when they started to work, nobody was ready to give them any house. So they were living on the streets. So they were
Wow.
living on the train station. I'm talking about the train station in Verona. So for a person who wants to point the exact place I'm talking about now. So they will go to work, they will come, they don't have any house to stay. They will basically hang around in the city. They remain like this for a number of time until they could manage to find a house. And when they manage to find a place they can stay, of course, they cannot give out to many people now. They're beginning to get used to the system, call it like that. Now they have one house. So a lot of people will be inside this house because, okay, we are the same people now. We don't want to leave people on the street. So they were very accommodative to other people that look
Welcoming,
like
yeah.
them in the community. Because now maybe you might read books or look at research, they will tell you, oh, there are a lot of Africans in the house. It's for this reason, because if they don't have a house to stay, just because you don't want to give them a house doesn't mean that as an African, I should leave them on the street. No, I want them
Yeah.
to be in a place. So that is the reason why a lot of Africans are in the house, because there is no house available. For not that there is no house available, the people didn't want to give them the house.
They don't want to rent them out.
Yeah,
Wow.
they didn't want to rent the house out. It's not like it's not for free.
Yeah,
They
of
will
course,
pay,
especially.
but yet it was difficult for them to get a house. So some of these first Africans basically live on the street. But why that is important for me is that when I came in the August of 2004, I didn't have to live on the street. But I didn't have to live on the street because somebody have already made the sacrifice. Somebody have already laid the road for me. So that as we are talking about story now, we are telling the story of the people, the pioneers, those who came before and make
Yes.
it possible for us to have a place to stay. They make it possible for us that when you walk around the street, like for example, in the Veronata region of Verona, where you have a lot of shop, you could
Mhm.
buy food that you want to eat, your food and things like that, because now you don't need to change everything as you are coming in.
Yeah.
You need to eat different food, you need to speak different language. You need to start somewhere. You start somewhere by meeting people that look like you. You could go to the church together.
Mhm.
People could advise you. So all these
Yeah.
are really the dichotomy that we find here in this research. But of course, the research will go beyond Italy, because after we have done this research for a number of years, I will say I want to understand, but now I understand what is happening in northern part of Italy. But what about other parts of the world? So that is what led to the podcast that I call the Obehi podcast. Because now it allowed me to be able to talk to different people, different experts, professional, professors, a university lecturer, business people, community leader, military
Yeah.
expert, people from different backgrounds. I've interviewed over 1,000 people in the podcast. So
Amazing.
US, in the UK, in Canada, in China, in France, in Germany, in Australia, in Africa, basically from different parts of the world. And it has been really enriching for me. And
Mm.
that also led to a proprietary methodology that we now have for storytelling that we call ONBA, which is
Oh,
basically helping individual to tell story in a way that is not just to entertain people, but that is a methodology of how to tell story to preserve also the narrative that you want to share. Of course, that
yes.
is a different dimension to the conversation. But sorry, I don't want to over speak, but I just
No,
want to
please.
break it down like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's ONBA, you said, yeah?
Yeah, ONBA.
And what does that stand for?
Okay, the O stand for, of course, my name, because
Mm.
in the course of my research and also for trademark, I understand that the MBA was already, because the MBA is actually the real thing. I'm coming to explain it just now. The MBA was already highly trademarked because of the American National Football Association. So we didn't want to have problem with them.
Sure.
So since I've been the one in the forefront of this project, I just put my name before so that I become ONBA. But what
Yeah.
does it really mean, the NBA? The NBA basically means that looking at what we have done here in Verona, we usually start with it now. You know, when you want to tell a story, of course, based on when we are actually targeting, you need to start with it now. What is the situation of the now? Whether
Right.
you want to use this in business, because in my 5-part book series, this was actually well explained. Whether you are talking to a business owner, you are talking to somebody, to a leader, you don't usually start with what have happened before, but where are you? Because if you don't understand what is happening now, you can't understand where you are, what have happened before.
Yeah.
Are you a teacher? Are you a mother? We need to look at what is happening at the moment. They help us to be able to examine what is around. If we
Mhm.
get that picture very clear, then we move to the before, which is the big part of it. The before is before you become what you are today, before the situation became what it is today, before we get to where we are today, where were we? That
Mm.
where were we is very fundamental in that it helps us to understand the story, help us to understand The journey help us to understand that we didn't just start now. We didn't just start it in this moment. Even though this moment is important, but we are a product of a process. So what is that process? So it takes us back to where we are coming from. And of course, within the framework of the demographic that we have focused on for a long time now, that will also make sense because we focus a lot on the African diaspora. For many people in the African diaspora community, the question of where we come from is fundamentally important. Because
Absolutely.
they ask the question, where did my ancestors came from? Of course, for
Mm.
any person who have a brain now, we understand how the people in the diaspora came to be.
Yeah.
So it also makes sense that people are asking the question, who were my ancestors? What did they do? Where did they come from? Because whatever happened to them happened to me too.
Mm.
Because for me to understand who I am today, I also need to understand where did I come from? That is
Yeah, I
part of the
do.
process. Now, when we understand that, we move to the A part of it, which is what we call the after. That also
Uh-huh.
means the legacy. That also means the lesson learned. Now where you come from, you know who you are. What happened now? What happened after that? So
Mm.
whether you are using it in the framework of teaching somebody within the area of business, because the 5-part book series is focusing also on people that are within the business. How do you use storytelling in your business? So now you can look at it that you are teaching somebody about how to maybe reappropriate their narrative. After you have done the part A and part B, the part C become very important. Now I tell you this. Now what? So that now what is fundamentally important is that you look at where are you going from here? Because you know
Mm.
where you come from, but where are you going from? What is the essence of it? What is the lesson learned? Why do we do this? So this is a framework that we use in the story to us in the story in our storytelling exercise. We use it in our academy, the A Crisis Academy, but we also use it I have two NGO. We also use it in our two NGO, which is With Diaspora and the OEE Foundation. So it's
Amazing.
a fundamental aspect of everything that I do. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is it's really preserving that heritage as well, isn't it? And all the people are physically not in the country of their ancestors, but they're preserving their heritage and the lessons from the past, as I understand you to be saying.
Absolutely correct. But now we are starting a 90 days pilot program here in Verona. Again, we are starting at the Veroneta where we have done already a documentary. What we are focusing on there is a challenge that we already have here, both in Europe and of course in other part of the world, which is the isolation of the elders of
Mm.
the elderly people in that sometimes they are left alone, sometimes they are just left, okay, they're no longer useful, so we can just put them in a house, in an elderly home and things like that. So based on our research, we are saying that we can use the OMBA framework to be able to engage with these people. They are still useful. And of course, this is not something that is peculiar to the Italian situation or to the European situation. It's something that we design for Africa, but we want to pilot programming. We want to test it first.
Mm.
Because the idea is coming from the adage in Africa that when an elder died, a library burns down.
Mm.
Therefore, before that library burns, can we do something about it? So we are
Yeah,
trying to marry the young and the old so that they can engage together. So that the
amazing.
younger person that go to meet an elder, you should be interested in their story because their story is telling you where you are coming from. So ask them questions, learn from them. So we
Mhm.
use the MBA framework to be able to extract this story and of course prepare it also for the future. So everything is just within this framework.
Amazing. And obviously remind the listeners that everything you're talking about, the books and the projects, will be in our show notes so people can follow up with you. So, what took you to Italy? Was it just by chance or did you choose Italy?
By that time that I came to it, there was already my brother here, so it makes very sense in the world now that okay, I will be here too. Though my brother now get fed up, so he returned to Nigeria, but I'm still here because immigration sometimes can be really very challenging for any person who have left home and you have stayed away for 3, 4 years. You get to a point that you start wondering what is the essence of it because now you start to make sense of the madness. So there are
Yeah,
not everybody is good to stay. Is not everybody should
no,
not stay.
it's not right for everybody, no.
Yeah, that is the reason I came because I already had somebody here.
Yeah, that makes huge sense. Now, talk a little bit about your books. So, what about for people who are leaders in business? Because looking through your LinkedIn, you've got some amazing reviews of how you've helped people. So, in that aspect of your work, how are you doing that? How are you helping people to find out their? 'Cause you talk about the leaks. That was interesting. The leaks in leadership.
Yeah, so what I do for business, though we are focusing on businesses that have been in operation for a considerable amount of time because we're talking about legacy most of the case, no?
Yeah.
We like to say we don't want to teach you how to make money. You already would have made money before you qualified to become our client. Because
Right.
we help you to be able to preserve your story for the next generation. That is what we do. So
Amazing.
how we do this, we have a framework that we call story to asset framework. So what we do with that is that we basically start with understanding who you are, where are you coming from. It's help to create a generational anchor. An anchor now will mean when you have a ship that is going in the sea, when you don't want to keep moving at the point, you need to put a ship somewhere, you anchor it at the point so that the ship is not just, it's not carried away by the wind, no? All right. So in business now, for somebody that have been in business for a considerable amount of time, even before we start understanding your data, your numbers and all of that, we want to understand, but who are you? Where are you
Yeah.
coming from? Because at a point, it become a challenging for some people to understand why are they really playing this game? Because you need money, because the money at a point will come. Then you will understand that it's not just the money that you need. You need something more than the money. So we start by understanding where really are you coming from? What really is the essence of what you are doing?
Mm.
We do this through another complementary technique that we call PET, photo elicitation techniques, for people who might not maybe be very, they might not want to speak up openly, but we try to gather information around you to help you to stimulate the conversation.
Uh-huh.
All what we are looking for in this phase is to understand your story, your mission, your intuition, your joy, what make you happy. What have you been thinking of from childhood? By the time we gather this information, we help you to frame what you can call your blueprint of
Uh-huh.
identity. Because with this, you also want to be able to explain why are you doing what you are doing, who are you doing it for, and most importantly, what do you want to be remembered for when you no longer do this? Because we don't live very long as human beings.
No, we
We
don't.
live like just in the twinkle of an eye, then we disappear. So we need to think about after that.
Yes.
So when we finish with that, then we move into, because this is called story to asset. Now you know your story, we need to translate it into asset. What kind
Mhm.
of asset do you want? It can be anything from you want a book. Of course, we can write the book for you, or we can work with our partner to create a really solid book that you can use for yourself, for
Mhm.
your business, or you can use to transmit your message to the generation that is going to come. That can be a book, but it can also be a documentary. We can
Right.
create a documentary for you that you can use to maybe reach a higher feed, a higher spectrum that you are not in today. You want to pitch to some other person, but you want to tell them this is where I came from. Maybe you
Mm.
want to use it during a reunion of the company, because now you want to let the people understand what really makes us who we are. So you create this really powerful documentary that tell that story.
Love it.
So
And I
another
can,
thing that we also do as an asset, because now we understand the story, we are in the face of the asset, is a proprietary methodology. Because maybe you have a coaching company,
Mhm.
or you've been doing something. The reason we don't do this for somebody that is just starting a business is that you haven't matured. You don't understand what you are doing yet. But
Yeah.
if you have been doing it for 10, 15 years, you would have developed approach of how do
Mm.
you take somebody from point A to point B?
Yes.
What can you say? This is my approach, this is my methodology. So we help you to translate that story, this proprietary methodology that you can either sell or use to teach also other people. So it becomes a product that you can hold in your hands.
Amazing.
So the third phase is the activation of that. Okay, sorry, I'm just
No, please. It's really exciting to hear. Very refreshing.
So the third phase is the activation, because now that you have everything ready, you don't want to keep it for yourself. You need to share it with the people. How do you want to share it with people? Then we go into that, and we basically look at this phase that we call the activation. Yeah.
It makes huge sense. And I can see the connection with talking about being back in Africa in various countries and knowing your background, knowing your history. And I think maybe in Europe, we've lost a little bit of that in terms of individuals. Someone just the other day was talking about everything's on email, there's not so much handwriting. And we would have grandparents' memories from handwritten diaries or cards, and it is getting lost. So,
Unfortunately, that is what we are
yeah,
trying. That's what we are trying to revive with our project. It's fundamentally important.
absolutely. No, it's really lovely to hear. And to be honest, something that maybe I certainly hadn't thought about in any depth, and a lot of our listeners won't have done. And we've all heard of companies that lose their way when the figurehead either resigns, passes on, and nobody knows that template that you spoke about. They just know the end results. Absolutely amazing. Storytelling, have you always told stories from a child, or did this come to you later on? Is it part of the heritage? Tell us how you came to be a storyteller.
Actually, I didn't consider myself a storyteller, but I always knew I was going to tell story. This is how I know. From a very early age, I saw my elderly brother. Actually, the one I came to meet here, his name was Osogbemudia.
Mm,
By that time, I haven't started school yet. He has started school.
right.
I saw him reading. That was a magic for me.
Uh-huh.
In the sense that how can you look at some tiny thing on the paper and you are talking? Is something wrong with my brother? For that moment, I was always very curious about the power of written words. There is something that is conditioning somebody to talk.
Yeah.
Because now I've always noted that moment that for you to talk, you need to talk to somebody. Either my mother is talking to my brother or talking to my father, because that is the conversation is taking place between two people.
Right.
But now I can see somebody talking to himself, just looking at some tiny paper. That is what actually triggered my curiosity. So that even when I was in the secondary school, I remember I told my teacher, everybody, there is those moments where you say, what do you want to become? Things like that. I said, I want to be a writer. My teacher was saying, but if you don't want to be a writer, you still want to specialize in something. I said, I want to be a writer. So I actually wrote my first book. I was in secondary school. I think I was in junior secondary school. Then I published it when I was a senior. So this book is titled Round My Mind.
Around my mind.
So
Okay.
recently I reviewed the book again, then I republished it. So that is actually how it started. So one of my most read book here in Italy is titled Ahmed and the Stream Water. In that book, it actually started with storytelling, but up to this time, I didn't even regard myself as a storyteller. So the book started like this in the village of Okpuje. Okay, the elderly person who is also a storyteller is named Okpuje. So therefore,
Uh-huh.
his village is connected to him, meaning the village of Okpuje, and therefore something like that. So he was a storyteller. In that every evening, all the children in Okpuje, will come to meet this elderly man, Okpuje, to listen to his story. And he was telling the story all the time. So the children, of course, this is something that we did now as a child growing up in Nigeria, that I treasured it a lot to listen to an elderly person telling me story. So these children, they listen to this story every day. So I made a rhetorical question in the book saying, why are these children coming all the time? What do you want to know that you haven't known? All this year you are coming there. This elderly man is telling you story all the time. What is this saying? If he's telling a story, at least you would have finished by now. But the children are still coming every day. I said, it's not just about the story, it's a ritual. It's more
Yeah.
than just the story. By this time, I still didn't consider myself a storyteller until later when I've written this 5-part book series, The Storytelling Mastery, that I can maybe refer to myself as somebody having to do with storytelling. So
Amazing.
that's it.
No, that's incredible. And as you say, it is a ritual, especially when people are younger, to hear that story and over again. But there's so many comforts. I haven't got the words to describe how it feels, but it takes us back to our childhood, what you're saying, where we would have the bedtime story and we'd know the story so well. Yeah, just one point, because people are going to be interested to follow up with your books. So where can they find them? Do they contact you directly? Are they available in different languages? Because I'm aware you must speak quite a few languages. You're in Italy, your English is fluent, obviously. What are, so let me recap. Where can they find your books?
All right, to find my book, you need to come to our website, A Classes Academy.
Okay, we'll put
Though
that in the show notes. Yeah.
yeah, you can also find the book. I think it's available in some other place. It was available on Amazon, but Amazon closed my account because when you are trying different things as a person trying to understand what's happening, maybe you make an offense. So they said I published a book that was having to do with a copyright or something because I was publishing a public domain book. So they closed my account. Every time
Yeah,
I
it
reopen
happens.
account, they always close it. So that is why you don't find it on Amazon. But of
It's
course, you
probably
can.
better that people go to direct to your website, to be honest.
So come to my website, aclasses.org. Of course, you can also come to my personal website, which is the foundation website, obehi1.com. So any of these two, you can find my book, or you can simply just put my name on Google, Obehi A14. It will take you to our website. Yeah.
Fantastic. So my other question was, Is it published in just in English or in other languages?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot that. Yeah,
No.
it's most of my books are both in Italian and in English.
Okay,
I share for
fantastic.
the fact that I'm here in Italy, so I just wanted to make the Italian people able to access the book. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. And as a British person, sadly aware that many British people only speak English, but the richness of the other languages is not to be underestimated. So I was also asking you about how many languages you speak, because obviously there's two there, but are there more?
I would say I speak three languages in this sense because I speak my mother tongue, which is the language of my people, Esan, south of Nigeria, because my mother can never speak to me in English. Okay, so then of course in Nigeria, because we have this heritage of being a bit colonized by the British, so we speak English in Nigeria.
There's so
Then
many languages in Nigeria, aren't there?
yes, no, in my area we speak Esan. Then of course, then I speak English because English is the official language of Nigeria.
Yeah, of course,
Then
yeah.
of course, then I live in Italy, so I just have to speak Italian. I have no reason not to do that.
Amazing. And for the young people and or the people coming and living in other countries, I personally think the power of language knowledge is underestimated because to have those different languages and they're key to cultures, aren't they? As you're saying, it's the preserving the heritage, isn't it?
Absolutely. And language is really very powerful in this sense, in that it helps you to live, because some people think that by the time you learn another language, you lose your own, but it is not true. Actually, it helps you to learn more about your own, because now you are going to compare and contrast. As you are doing that, you are learning more. Whereas if you don't learn your language, this is an advice I usually will give to many parents in the diaspora. You need to make an effort to let your children know your language. Knowing
Yeah.
your language doesn't mean they're going to lose the language of the country where they are living.
No.
Actually, it helped them to be richer because now they can understand more vocabulary. If a language is a window into the culture, it means
Yeah,
you give your children more possibility now in the world.
absolutely.
Because some people think that, oh, I'm living in Italy, the official language in Italy is Italian. So if I make my child speak my language, it will not be able to speak Italian. It is not true. I
No.
think many studies have proven that a child growing up can learn up to like 9 different languages because we are powerful.
Yeah, like sponges, those little ones. Yeah, absolutely. And such a good point that it leads into culture and not all words translate, do they? Because they're so embedded in a culture that there isn't an equivalent in another language. And to your point, that opens up more ideas, more understanding, and the
Yeah.
heritage indeed. Now, I know that we're a bit short of time today because you're a bit busy man. So I want to thank you for being on the podcast. And I usually finish with three questions, which are modelled on the UK desert island discs. Hope there's no copyright on that word. Um, but so I just want to slightly modify it, if I may. So I ask my guests three questions if they were on a deserted island, what would they like? So I would, and typically I ask about food, music, and one favorite thing. So perhaps we could think about cultural heritage. So what food, whether it's Italian, Nigerian, or anything else, would you take with you to your island? If you could take one,
Definitely, that would be pounded yam. Of course, everybody that
yeah.
knows Nigeria now we know that because I can't do without that.
Fair enough. Excellent. And that gives us an. And what, if you could take one piece of music, we'll imagine that you can play it. What music would you take with you?
What music will I take with me? I find it difficult to pick the best one actually,
Yeah, it's such a huge
because
choice.
I love a lot of music. I will
So
pick a lot of it if it is possible, but if not,
let's narrow it down a little bit. Would it be contemporary? Would it be classical? Would it be Nigerian music? Would it be reggae? Would it be pop music? What would it be?
I would love to take with me the music of Bob Marley, the music that talks about that preached against discrimination, where he
Yeah,
was saying, making reference to El Selassie speech at the United Nations, I think that was in Geneva,
yeah,
saying that until the philosophy that hold one man against another is dismantled, there will always be war.
yeah.
He said it then, is relevant then, it's still relevant now. For the
Isn't it
work that I do, that is the music I would pick.
awesome? And I was going to say, with choosing Bob Marley, you've got some amazing poetry there in that, in the words of his songs. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And one like tool or practical thing that you would take with you, whether it's electronic or whatever, what would you take?
I would take computer because I work with it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And just to remind our listeners, everything that's been mentioned, we'll put the links down below so that people can easily get to your website, see your books, and to your social media platforms. So thank you very much. Any final words for my audience of entrepreneurs, business people? What would you give them? Final words of advice.
All right. Well, any advice? What I would say is that we need to know our story. We need to know, the women will say, know your onions.
Yeah,
It is very important that you know your story. In the world today, there are more than 5.5 billion people on the internet. On the internet, that is more than 5.5 billion people according to Google. If you are just replicating whatever that person is saying, you are going to lose.
yeah.
Instead, if you find your story and leverage it, you can never compete with any person because there are no two people in this world that are exactly the same. So
Mm,
your story is your blue ocean.
thank you.
Find it, hone it, and use it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.